I couldn't help at one point in my discussions privately with General Secretary Gorbachev, when you stop to think that we're all God's children, wherever we may live in the world, I couldn't help but say to him, just think how easy his task and mine might be in these meetings that we held if suddenly there was a threat to this world from some other species, from another planet, outside in the universe. We'd forget all the little local differences that we have between our countries, and we would find out once and for all that we really are all human beings here on this earth together. Well, I don't suppose we can wait for some alien race to come down and threaten us, but I think that between us we can bring about that realization. In our obsession with antagonisms of the moment, we often forget how much unites all the members of humanity. Perhaps we need some outside universal threat to make us recognize this common bound. I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world. And yet, I ask you, is not an alien force already among us? What could be more alien to the universal aspirations of our peoples than war and the threat of war? I think maybe I'd answer it this way. I keep, in my frustration sometimes, you know, actually, if you count some of the things going on in smaller countries and all, there have been about 114 wars since World War II. But I've often wondered, what if all of us in the world discovered that we were threatened by a power from outer space, from another planet? Wouldn't we all of a sudden find that we didn't have any differences between us at all? We were all human beings, citizens of the world, and wouldn't we come together to fight that particular threat?
This is going to be a really great conversation. You are not going to want to miss it. I'm speaking with Matt Ehret. He is a historian. He looks at things that other people don't look at. He looks at the history, the real history that happened in both the United States, Canada, and the world. He's gone down rabbit holes by looking at original documents. And this is key. Don't take our word for it. You can also do your own research. And I know it's very popular right now with mainstream media that say, don't do your own research, just go to us. If you remember that when the WikiLeaks came out, you had Chris Cuomo say to everybody that don't go to WikiLeaks, go to CNN and they'll tell you what's important. Well, if you're a thinking human being, you have to do your own research, because I believe, and I believe Matt believes this too, that our future depends on it. Because if you don't know where you've come from, how will you know where you are or where you're going? And before I introduce Matt and what brought us together, I want to read a quote, because I think this quote symbolizes the work that Matt is doing, along with many other people who are speaking truth to power. And it happens to be the last speech that Martin Luther King Jr. gave before he was assassinated. He gave it when he was 38 years old, and 3 months after he gave this speech, he was no longer with us. And it goes like this: you may be 38 years old, as I happen to be, and one day some great opportunity stands before you and calls you to stand up for some great principles, some great issue, some great cause, and you refuse to do it because you are afraid. You refuse to do it because you want to live longer. You are afraid that you will lose your job, or you are afraid that you will be criticized, that you will lose your popularity, or you are afraid that somebody will stab you or shoot you at you or bomb your house. So you refuse to take the stand. You may go on and live until you are 90, but you are just as dead at 38 as you would be at 90. And the cessation of breathing in your life is but the belated announcement of an earlier death of the spirit. In essence, if you don't follow your call, that you're meant to speak your truth, doesn't matter how long you die, you will just join your spirit, your soul, when your body leaves the earth, because you will have already died. Matt has actually gone and done research. He spoke in truths that I'm sure a lot of people in the power structure don't like. And he just finished writing a few weeks ago an article that caught my attention. Matt runs an organization called the Canadian Patriot. It's a sovereign voice in a chorus of nations. And the article he wrote is called "What Do UFOs, Lawrence Rockefeller, and MK Ultra Have in Common More Than You Think?" Matt, what inspired you to write this article and share with us? Give us a summary of what it is, and let's discuss it.
Thank you, Peter, for the platform and for another great conversation. I really do appreciate, before I answer that directly, that I do appreciate you opening with that MLK quote. And sure enough, I mean, MLK was a man who really had confronted his mortality and the fear of mortality and really gone through the fire and he came out of that process, as anyone must, who does really honestly confront the fact of our mortality with the pursuit of what is the higher purpose of life, with a greater degree and power of wisdom that gave him a capacity to do things that most people couldn't comprehend. How this man was able to have the energy, the creative stamina, and the ability to look the devil in the face and not blink. And even, I was reviewing just yesterday his From the Mountaintop speech delivered on April 3rd. He died April 4th, where he's very clear. He's obviously received a lot of threats to his life. And he, tells the people listening in the stadium that I may not get there with you. I'd like to lead a long life, but I've seen the promised land, and I know he had faith that the arc of history is long, but it bends towards justice. And I think that that's the faith that we all need to really tap into at this time of crisis, because ultimately we are up against powers and principalities. We are up against an oligarchical structure, which is it stands in defiance of truth and any concept of God, the soul, that have given rise to the greatest creative leaps into goodness in all of human history. This institution, which goes back thousands of years, has always existed as sort of like a parasite, ideologically committed to crushing the good. And that idea of humankind being made in the living image of a loving creator, endowed by such not only with inalienable rights, but also with inalienable powers of reason, and improving the powers of reason through making greater discoveries and changing or modifying our identities in accordance with the discoverable laws of creation, has been at the heart of everything good, including the American Revolution. You look at the founding fathers, you can't understand what motivated these people to risk so much for the sake of an idea unless you tap into that awareness. And I think due to the fact that we live today 50 plus years into a consumer society, sort of go nowhere, stagnant culture, we've increasingly lost connection with our true essence as a species endowed with these powers. Now, I think that as far as that article, that essay that I recently published, it was something that I had originally done a lot of research on some years back. I decided, since I'm working on a book right now, to better, it'll be volume 5 of my Clash of the Two Americas book series. I'm doing the finishing touches on it right now. And I wanted to really zero in on what is the British Empire as a still existent force in world affairs that has taken over control of the United States through the management of fifth columnists going back to 1776. That was the topic. Some of this was the topic of my previous 3 books of the series, but this one I really wanted to focus on, well, what is this thing called a modern British Empire today that still exists? It didn't go away in 1945.
Can I just share something which you touched
Sure.
upon it, because it's for me, it's always the most powerful part of the Declaration of Independence, and it's always stuck with me. And it was the last sentence. It says, "We mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor." And that to me is really the essence. And John Hancock, the reason he signed his signature so big, because he said, "Come and get me, because my soul is more valuable than anything else. And I want King George or Saxburg Cope or whatever he was to take my life."
Yeah.
So go on with your.
No, exactly. And I mean, the founding fathers also knew that they didn't create a democracy as such. They understood, and you read the writings, they understood that a democracy was just the flip side of a tyranny. It was the same thing. And a demos just means ruled by the mob. And the mob, if people think like a mob, everyone has seen the behavior of how individuals lose their individuality and are capable of degrees of viciousness and stupidity when they're in a herd, which they would never do individually. And the herd is always something which, if you allow yourself to get into that, you're always going to be controlled by a demagogue who is able to control the masses by either giving them false arrogance or fear of the other, right? That there's always going to be the demagogue will get you to be afraid of that which you don't understand, or will just be able to keep you in a state of general terror or idiotic bliss. Either way, it won't be encouraging the sovereignty of the individual to actually rise. And the founding fathers were very explicit that a democratic republic is what they created. And John Quincy Adams said it best, that a democratic republic only can exist in a devoutly religious people who are moral. If you don't have that cultural standard maintaining and improving upon itself and the people generation to generation, if that disappears, you cannot have a democratic republic. It will be in name only. It will become easily a feudal oligarchy, maybe with the outward veneer of capitalism or democracy, but it won't be real. So that's part of the interesting thing. And it does all touch on the question of, well, why did I write this paper on UFOs, the Rockefellers, MK Ultra, and why am I writing this book on the British Empire, which this is going to be a chapter in that book. Part of the book, the way I set it up before I get it, what is the modern British Empire and how it took over, especially over the dead bodies of Franklin Roosevelt, John F. Kennedy, Bobby Kennedy. There was this, it wasn't that there was these assassinations from within the United States. It's that these assassinations occurred in order for the culmination of a coup, a takeover of the means of conducting economic, military, and other forms of policy, both domestically and foreign policy wise, which had to it could only occur if true patriots were wiped out at that period. So I go into what are some of the mythologies, the explanatory models that have been concocted by creative writers affiliated with intelligence agencies to deflect the mind of creative people who think outside the box into misdirections so that they devote their time and energy into things that avoid the real causal hand of this oligarchy, which goes back, if you look at the families that have been maintaining their continuity of structures of empire, it goes back hundreds, thousands of years. But they don't want people to see that. They don't want to, and so I try to get across that in the course of the book. And I have a chapter on bad guys are the Jesuits. So I have a chapter on the Jesuit conspiracy. What are the Jesuits? How were they created as a synthetic cult in the 15th century out of Venice, ironically, not even Spain. I got a chapter on UFOs, because that's another thing that absorbs, it has oftentimes there's many explanatory models, whether it's David Icke with shape-shifting lizards from another dimension, or there's a whole bunch of variants. They often will capture people's attention. They had my attention for many years. I was a big fan of this stuff for years. And the reason why is because they'll tell you a bunch of factually true things, whether it's about 9/11, bankers' conspiracies, ancient conspiracies, all of these things. And so you give your trust over by the trivial factoids that are blatantly true, provably so. And as soon as your sentinels of reason go to sleep, you let in all of the other, like David Icke, I would say he's right about 95% of the material.
Right.
But then it's that 5% of, oh yeah, and they're shape-shifting lizards from the 13th dimension sucking your fear energy, which is the real heart of all of the problems. And it's like, as soon as you take that one in, it doesn't matter that you think that 95% of the information you now have is true. That 5% just,
it's like having fresh water and then someone throws in a turd in the barrel.
Ooh,
It
yeah,
just pollutes all of it.
that's a terrible, truthful, exact analogy. That's exactly it. So that's what got me on it. And I started doing a little bit of work on like, well, why is it that the Pentagon the Pentagon right now, the British government for the past 3 years have really been putting a lot of energy into investigations and disclosures of UFO aerial phenomena. And at a time of such global historic proportion that we're living in right now, we're living in a time of systemic change. We're on a very high danger of a nuclear war, a major civilizational crisis. At the same measure, there's a lot of opportunity in time of such crisis too. So there's a lot of good, a lot of bad. It can go either way. But why now at this moment would they put such resources into something like this at this point, right? So then it got me started when I was like digging a little bit around, and I found that one of the key figures who was among the loudest for disclosure amongst Washington insiders was a figure who became infamous around Pizzagate, a former assistant to Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton's campaign manager.
You mean the one he does like special signs
all over the place? Yeah, he's into all sorts of stuff. And this guy was like one of the, and it wasn't just that he was a champion of this in the past few years. It goes back to the late 90s. He was really advocating full aliens disclosure, talking about Area 51.
And this gentleman's name is?
John Podesta.
John Podesta, and isn't he back in the White House right now as an advisor?
I think so, but I have to verify that. So don't quote me on that at the moment. Maybe you could do a Google search while we're talking, but I might be right. He's definitely an insider, very close to Hillary. He's very close to all of the Obama insiders and
he's
the road
into
scholars.
spirit cooking as well.
Yeah, he taps into the Maria Abramovich networks, and it gets disturbing. And like I said, the Pizzagate stuff. I know you're not supposed to talk about that in public society, but it was a thing. That's a thing. But so around him, he participated.
Can I just share with you quickly, because I did Google it.
Yep.
John Podesta has been appointed to develop climate strategies.
There you go. There you go. Well, that plays into the Lawrence Rockefeller thing. So part of this was that, well, Podesta was involved with the creation and maintenance of an organization called To the Stars Academy. They got a cardboard cutout frontman named Tom DeLonge, who, for those who might have listened to punk music in the 90s, would have recognized the name as being the front singer for Blink-182.